Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are back to book 2 of Hard Times, Reaping, which started with the chapter Effects in the Bank. As you remember, or if you don't remember, I will refresh your memory concerning the details that took place in chapter 1. This chapter offered the new ideas concerning Sparset's future, who used to live with Bounderby's house, but now she's living in a different place. And the chapter also revealed the character of Bitzer, the brilliant student of the School of Facts, and how he considers Tom, Louisa's brother. The chapter also showed how Tom is portrayed as a kind of idler, as an extravagant and a lazy person who would not reach the post or the position he is assuming now, whether it was not for his sister's sake. It also gave us an idea about, and this is the important thing, the link between the previous chapter and this one. There is a new visitor who came from London with a letter of introduction. He seems to be a friend of Mr. Gradgrind, and he gave him a letter of introduction and sent him to Bounderby. So he came to Bounderby's bank, where he saw Mrs. Sparset, who told him that Bounderby is not living here, in a different place, and we understood something about the way he looks like a handsome person with some elegant looking, good dressing, and these details about this visitor. Chapter 2 is entitled James Harthouse. This is the title of the chapter. Mr. James Harthouse. So I'd like you to remember that the visitor whom we met in the previous chapter is this person, Mr. James Harthouse. Now I take you to the notes I have to the chapter, which we are going to discuss in the chapter totally. James Harthouse. We need to highlight the name of this person. What does it mean, James Harthouse? And the chapter showed, or the previous chapter actually showed, that this person never hid his attraction to Louisa, or his earnestness to meet this lady whom he's heard a lot about from her father, that she is a good woman with good education and good looking and a stature in the society and so on. So he seems very curious about how Louisa looks, and he was fed by with some details by Mrs. Sparset. The purpose of his visit is made clear in this chapter. Some reference to the Industrial Revolution is also present in chapter 2. How the workers' conditions are portrayed and their status. And at the end we find James visiting Bounderby at his house to feed his passion to know Louisa and sit and talk with her. And finally the chapter gives us an idea about Tom, who showed up at the end of the chapter. If we start with the beginning, I have highlighted the main paragraphs and the main extracts that the chapter where it shows the importance. After a few dashes in the public meeting, Mr. Gradgrind and a council of political sages approved of Jim. His name is Jim. This is the abbreviated form of this person. Jim sounds like Jawhara, and Harthouse gives us a kind of impression that Harthouse means the house of the heart, Baytul Qalb, the place where the house is kept. So these names should trigger something in our minds when we considers them, when we consider them, especially when Louisa is not very far from these ideas. So wherever there is Louisa, James's name must indicate something. A heart and a house and Jim, Jawhara and Louisa. This could provide us with some details concerning the future of the connection or the relation between James and Louisa. So this is usual with Charles Dickens. He usually gives us hints and links that we could build a story on, and details would come, of course, later. It was resolved to send him down to Coketown to become known there and the neighborhood. منو ذولي party of Gradgrind. Mr. Gradgrind and a council of political sages approved. As you know, Bounderby, Gradgrind is working now as a member of a parliament, and he belongs to a party. So they wanted to send a representative to the city of Coketown to do some business there. So they sent him to Coketown to become known there and in the neighborhood. Hence, the letter Jim had last night shown to Sposset, which Mr. Bounderby now held in his hand, superscribed Josiah Bounderby, Esquire, Banker, Coketown. هذا عنوان رسالة كانت من اللي شايلها جيمس. Especially to introduce James Harthouse, Esquire. السيد يعني Esquire السيد أو السير. Thomas Gradgrind. Within an hour of the receipt of this dispatch, هذا الطرد, and Mr. James Harthouse's card, Bounderby put on his hat and went down to the hotel. Bounderby انطلق إلى الهوتيل حتى يستقبل هذا الشخص, because he carries this letter for him. There he found James looking out of a window in a state of mind so disconsolate that he was already half disposed to go in for something else. My name, sir, said his visitor, is Josiah Bounderby of Coketown. طبعا أكيد من راح أشوف شخص جديد, you know that Bounderby will repeat the cliche that he keeps in mind. راح يعيد لنا هذه الطريقة مالته, إنه أنا شخص وعندي banker وعندي أموال و I was born with nothing and I made myself, etc. Though he scarcely looked to have a pleasure he had long expected. Coketown, sir, said Bounderby, obstinately taking a chair, is not the kind of place you have been accustomed to. Coketown هو مو المكان اللي أنت معتاد تعيش بيه. Therefore, if you will allow me, or whether you will or not, for I am a plain man, I'll tell you something about it before we go any further. Here we understand something about the Industrial Revolution and its effect on the people of Coketown at that time. So Bounderby makes it clear. Don't be too sure of that. I don't promise it. First of all, you see our smoke? This quotation is important, of course. تشوف هذا الدخان? That's meat and drink to us. يعني we are accustomed to eat and to drink this smoke. It is the healthiest thing in the world in all respects, and particularly for the lungs. It is very useful for the lungs. If you are one of those who want us to consume it, I differ from you. We are not going to wear the bottoms of our boilers out any faster than we wear them out now. هاي المكائن والمصانع, we are pushing them to the limits in order to produce the fortune we need. By way of going in to the fullest extent, Mr. Harthouse rejoined, Mr. Bounderby, I assure you I am entirely and completely of your way of thinking. Of course they agree with each other. Now you have heard a lot of talk about the work in our mills. سمعت الكثير عن العمل في المصانع. You have very good. I'll state the fact of it to you. It's the pleasantest work there is. It's the lightest work there is. Of course, these ideas are false. They are not correct. People are not pleasant with their work. He's talking about the workers. The pleasantest work? It is not. It is the ugliest, actually. It is the lightest? No. It is the heaviest, because people go from sunrise to sunset and they suffer under such circumstances. It's the best paid work? It's not. So there is irony here, because Bounderby is not telling the truth. More than that, we could not improve the mills themselves unless we laid down Turkey carpets on the floors, which we are not going to do. Lastly, said Bounderby, now he talks about the workers. As to our hands, as they used to describe them, the workers as the hands. They do not exist, workers, only their hands, because they work with them. There is not a hand in this town, sir, man, woman, or child. So all these people are working, the man, the woman, and the child, but has one ultimate object in life. يحكي Bounderby, and those people have one final objective in their life. شنو هذا الobjective, الهدف? That object is to be fed on turtle soup. أنه يأكلون turtle soup. Turtle soup is a soup or stew made from the meat of turtles. هذا quotation أنا جبته من Google. Turtle soup is a soup or stew, حساء أو soup شراب, made from the meat of turtles من لحم السلاحف. Differing versions of the soup exist in some cultures. أنواع مختلفة من هذا الحساء متوفرة في بعض الثقافات and are viewed as something delicate, as delicacy. So Bounderby says those workers want turtle soup لأنه هذا الشيء ما كان كل شخص يحصله, only the high class people, and venison يعني لحم الغزال, with a gold spoon. They are not going, none of them, ever to be fed on turtle soup and venison with a gold spoon. ما حد بهم راح يحصل هذا الشيء. And now you know the place. Harthouse professed himself in the highest degree instructed and refreshed by this condensed epitome of the whole Coketown question. So here Bounderby made it clear how the city looks like. The smoke is the food and the drink. How the life is very pleasant at the workers, and the work is very light and it is very well paid, good paid. And how the workers are complaining. There is a huge irony here. And these are the main things, the main important things, and the most important in this chapter. So now, said Bounderby, we may shake hands on equal terms. I say equal terms because although I know what I am and the exact depth of the gutter I have lifted myself out of, من الحفرة اللي شلعت نفسي منها, better than any man does, I am as proud as you are. I am just as proud as you are, having now asserted my independence in a proper manner. I may come to how do you find yourself, and I hope you are pretty well. So he considers himself as an equivalent to James Harthouse because he made himself and developed his life. Perhaps you know, said he, or perhaps you don't. I married Tom Gradgrin's daughter. If you have nothing better to do than to walk uptown with me, I shall be glad to introduce you to Tom Gradgrin's daughter. And Bounderby, of course, you anticipate my dearest wishes. أنت تحقق لي أمنياتي. Here, her features were handsome. Their natural play was so locked up that it seemed impossible to guess at their genuine expression. This is how Louisa looked like. Utterly indifferent, غير مبالية, perfectly self-reliant, معتمدة على نفسها, never at a loss, and yet never at her ease with her figure in company with them there. Her mind apparently quite alone, شاردة الذهن. It was of no use going in yet a while to comprehend this girl, for she baffled all penetration. So from this description we understand that she is not in harmony with her husband. And other ideas, of course, will confirm this idea. From the mistress of the house, Dickens يحكي, the visitor glanced to the house itself. There was no mute sign of a woman. ماكو لمسة لهذه المرأة. No graceful little adornment. ماكو أي منمقات أو أي kind of decorations. No fanciful little device, however trivial, anywhere expressed her influence. Cheerless, comfortless, boastfully and doggedly rich, that the room stared at its present occupants, unsoftened, unrelieved by the least trace of any womanly occupation. Yani, the writer here tries to show that Louisa is not adapting or not accustomed to the place where she lives, because she does not have any touch, any womanly touch. You know, women, when they live in a house, of course there is a kind of vase here, a nice looking for example, a statue here, some roses, some flowers. So these things are missing, and the setting is very barren, as if no woman lives in this house. And he tries to reflect that Louisa does not like this place and does not like where she end up with. This, sir, is my wife, Tom Gradgrind's eldest daughter, Lou. Mr. James Harthouse has joined your father's muster roll. If he is not Tom Gradgrind's colleague before long, I believe we shall at least hear of him in connection with one of our neighboring towns. You observe that my wife is my junior. دائما Bounderby is boastful, is proud that he has a mistress, that his wife is very young. Junior, yani younger than him. I don't know what she saw in me to marry me, but she saw something in me. ما أعرف ليش اختارتني، بس أكيد أكو شيء جذبها. I suppose, or she wouldn't have married me. She has lots of expensive knowledge, political and otherwise. Mr. Bounderby, said Jim, turning with a smile to Louisa. He is smiling to Louisa. Is a noble animal in a comparatively natural state, quite free from the harness in which, etc. You respect Mr. Bounderby very much. She quietly returned. Louisa quietly returned. It is natural that you should. أنت أيضا يجب عليك show respect. You know, James here tried to exchange looks with Louisa as if he is attracted to her. Is there nothing, he thought, glancing at her as she sat at the head of the table, where her youthful figure, small and slight but very graceful, looked as pretty as it looked misplaced. وكأنه هذا المكان مو إلها. Is there nothing that will move that face? He is wondering. James is wondering. ماكو فد شي يحرك هذا الوجه يخليه من معبس أو neutral, either smiling or happy face? Yes, by Jupiter, they يحلف. There was something, and here it was in unexpected shape. Akushi, where Tom appeared. She changed as the door opened and broke into a beaming smile. تغير شكلها و بدت الابتسامة على وجهها when just Tom appeared, just when he opened the door. A beautiful smile, said James. Oh, James Harthouse might not have thought so much of it, but that he had wondered so long at her impassive face. And then she kissed Tom. I thought the visitor. So now, as you see, the visitor is planning for something. Thought the visitor. This whelp is the only creature she cares for. So. هذا الجرو, whelp يعني جرو, the puppy of the dog, is the only creature she cares for. هو المخلوق الوحيد اللي هي تهتم بيه. Later we will know why he called him. The whelp was presented and took his chair. The appellation was not flattering, but not unmerited. And then he started talking with her about Tom. Your brother's face is quite familiar. Can I have seen him abroad or some public space school? No, she returned, quite interested. He has never been abroad yet, and was educated here at home. Tom, love, I am telling Mr. Harthouse that he never saw you abroad. No such luck, sir. So, now James has just created a kind of connection when he understood that Tom is Louisa's favorite. So he now has this secret and will employ it in order to be closer to Louisa. She has ever cared for, thought Mr. James Harthouse, turning it over and over. So much the more, so much the more. Both in his sister's presence and after she had left the room, the whelp took no pains to hide his contempt for Bounderby whenever he could. As you see, Tom does not like Bounderby, and he showed it in front of Louisa and behind her. With these details, the chapter comes to its conclusion. So, as I summarized it here, James's name is indicating something concerning the house of the heart. The attraction to Louisa is made very evident in this chapter, and the purpose of his visit is made by the council to whom he belongs. They sent him just like a representative to the city. How Bounderby described Coketown as a city where the smoke is the food and the meat and the drink, and how described the hands as unsatisfied with the conditions, and they want to eat the turtle soup and to be fed with golden spoon and etc. And finally, James invited to Bounderby's house, and he started to pave the way to become close to Louisa, when he understood that Tom is only thing she loves in her life. So these are the main details, and we will uncover so many other details in the next chapter, inshallah.